So we're looking at divs and how nesting works in HTML and CSS. And I wanted to show you how this operates. And to do so, I need to change a couple of things in the files that we've worked with previously, and then apply CSS using IDs so that we can have separate divs for separate purposes. So I'm going to show you how all of this is done. The very first thing that I want to do down here is remind you that down in the bottom, we are using the block level element of a div and then a nested div inside of this. What I'm going to do down here is I'm going to give these separate IDs, and I'm going to call this one first one, and I'm going to call this one nested one. Okay. And by doing so, that gives me individual IDs that I can target on the page to make changes, right? So for some reason, my nesting overflow page is now showing me three divs in place of two. And golly, if I have no idea why that's happening. So I'll just hit refresh. And every once in a while, live preview gets out of sync. So I'm just going to hit refresh. This might be a more common error than you might expect. So I'm going to leave it in. I'll leave it in the video. And that's another little bite that you can have. So what I'm going to do here is we already looked at divs and nesting as the basics. And this is going to be the characteristics of every div that I have. But what if I want my first one to act a little bit differently than the other one? Well, this is where the style sheet cascade comes in. This is why it's called cascading style sheets or CSS. We can make specific changes to specific divs that might be a little bit different than others. So I'm going to put in a first one and a second one, and I'm going to change a couple of the things about the style of each of these so that we know which one is which. I'm going to put in the border of the second one. I'm going to call this 5 pixels, and I'm going to do dotted, and I'm going to do a nice fancy purplish color. So I'll go FF55FF. Okay. And I didn't call it second one, I called it nested one. So let's call it second one down here. Okay. And so now it takes on this characteristics. All right. So I have the default that I've given for every div that's going to show up on this page. And then my first one has no additional styling. My second one has this dotted line around it. And you'll see that the background color kind of bleeds out, extending past the edge there. The purpose of this is to show you that there's a little bit of a difference between the two of them. I'm going to put in a background color of let's pick Azure, why not? And that's going to also indicate that this is a different div than the one we have. So the intent of this lesson is to show you how the overflow settings work. And there are several different overflow settings, but inside of a box, sometimes the text doesn't fit into the box, especially when there's a height or a width associated with it, and very specifically whenever there's a height associated with it. So the automatic value here that you see on the screen is it's going to be browser's choice, whatever the browser does by default. You also can have overflow hidden, which means that overflow is not going to be visible on the screen, even though it might go over. And I'll show you that one. You also have inherit, which is going to be taking the characteristics from the parent or the previous, the container div. You'll also have scroll, and then you'll have visible. The default is visible, right? So I told you that in the previous video that HTML wants to show what's in the div. And so if there's some overflow on here, the default is going to be visible. This is the default value here. And I want to be able to indicate that that is the default value. right? For the purposes of this video, and sorry I'm clearing my throat, but you know, I've been talking a little while. And so for the purposes of this video, I'm going to put the overflow visible on the second one because I want to actually mess with the overflow on the first block element. So here we go. I'm going to put in an overflow on this one. And instead of overflowing on the visible, I'm going to do an overflow of scroll. And check out what happens. Once I do an overflow of scroll, it allows me to have a little region on this page that makes it scrollable. That's kind of neat. So now I can have a little view box or a viewport in there within a div. So that's kind of cool, right? I'm going to X out that one so that it's not recognized. And I'm going to put in the overflow. Let's not be sloppy like that. So what I wanted to show you is that if you X out something, it will not apply it. But I'm going to comment it out because I'm a professional. All right, so overflow. I'm going to do the a couple of the different options here. So I'm going to do an overflow of hidden to demonstrate what it looks like if the overflow is hidden. And then you'll see that when I hide the overflow, I can't scroll inside this at all. It's just going to hide anything that would be overflowing within that div. So that could be useful in several ways too. I'm going to comment this out so that you can't see that anymore. Applied, and it's going to go back to its default. The third thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go to overflow. And this one, we had hidden, scroll, and visible. And so we've seen overflow from all three of the viable perspectives. We also have a couple of different types of overflow that we can use. There's overflow X and overflow Y. So if you need to control one or the other of these and you just want somebody to be able to scroll horizontally or scroll vertically, you can use overflow X or overflow Y to do so. So if I do overflow X of hidden, right? Then what happens over in my HTML is that I can scroll up and down on this, but I cannot scroll left and right. There's no way to do that, right? Similarly, highlighted too much. Similarly, if you do overflow Y of hidden, I'll show you what that behavior looks like. Overflow -Y hidden. All right, let's check out what overflow Y looks like. When I do overflow Y, then I cannot scroll. It seems like it acts weird in brackets, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to disconnect live preview, and I'm going to just let this be on its own. And it's going to take on the characteristics here. So I disconnected live preview because live preview was making things harder for me. And so overflow Y is now hidden here. Okay, and that means on the Y-axis it's not going to scroll, but on the X-axis it will. And then the last case that I can show you is that we can do overflow -X, and then we can do overflow -Y. And I'm going to put in auto in here to show you that the auto is going to take on the defaults. I'm going to reactivate my live preview. That pops up in a new window, and I'm going to put that into place. Been looking at div overflow .html, and so it's a divs -nesting -overflow. And so here's my default with the scroll going left, right, and every which way. So I can leave one as hidden, and I can leave one as scroll. And now I have two independent controls for my scrolling over here. So I can scroll on the Y as a scroll, and I have scroll on the X as hidden. And so you can use these properties interchangeably as well. The outcomes might be the same, but knowing that you can control X and Y is very powerful. So hopefully that helps you to sort out how to do overflow on these boxes. All right. Next up, we'll do some more work. So see you then.